Hello and welcome to a very special day. We have with me Amish, his sister Bhavna Roy, who's not just his sister, but more than that as well. Amish, we all know, best-selling author, sort of. I consider him a detective of our past. He's brought, he's an archaeologist in a way. He's an anthropologist, a detective. He's brought to life so much of our past that he really deserves fully the position that he has currently as director of Nehru Center in London. Bhavna Roy, his sister, who shares, of course, who shared his upbringing and his sort of the best of Bharat and India, as they call it in the introduction to their new book, but also has worked in an NGO. She really does have a sense of what's happening on the ground. Hello and welcome, both of you, and congratulations on the new book, Dharma Decoding the Epics for a Meaningful Life, which I really, really enjoyed reading. It's told as series of stories, and I think all of you will find it very interesting to read. And I have Swami Mukundananda ji, who's really, again, quite a remarkable mind. Very, again, who straddles both tradition and modernity really beautifully, just like Amish and Bhavna. His book, again, The Science of Mind Management, which again I found very interesting, and I saw a lot of parallels between both the books as well. I would like to begin with Amish first, who's speaking from London, so he has our sympathies. we we in India, can feel a little fortunate at this point and pat ourselves on the back for whatever reason. We seem to be in a slightly better position than England is. But Amish, really, this book comes at a time when everything seems to be pointing to dharma. And really, what our responsibility is. I was just listening to the news in the morning, and there was Trump advising Mike Pence to, actually do something that should be actually against his dharma. But I was just wondering, it brought to mind Kumkaran and Ravan, in your book and your description of Kumkaran's dharma and Ravan's dharma. And I was just thinking, perhaps we could begin with that.
Yeah, and before I begin with that, I should clarify, since I'm a diplomat, I'm not comparing Kumbhakarna or Ravan to any of the
Of course.
you listed. No, no.
No,
I will not comment on politics
yeah,
at all.
but Amish, what I like about the books is that it makes everything so contemporary. You can relate it to the here and now.
Yeah, that's because the wisdom of our
Yeah,
ancestors is, in a sense, timeless.
yeah,
And dharma, in the way we absorb it, the way we understand it, the way it guides our decisions,
right.
is something that is relevant for all time.
Yeah,
And in this, in dharma, essentially, we of course speak of Kumbhakarna and Ravan from the perspective of loyalty,
yeah.
and we speak of other relationships also from the
Hmm,
perspective of loyalty.
hmm.
So Karna's relationship with Duryodhan and Parvateshwar's relationship with Lord Shiva in the
Not
Shiva
Shiva.
Tripitaka.
Yeah.
Now, all three were loyal individuals, right?
Hmm,
Kumbhakarna, Karna, and Parvateshwar. Um, and loyalty should be a beautiful thing, right? And
hmm,
but that's where we try and question that are there are there some limitations to loyalty as well?
hmm,
Are there
hmm,
things that we should consider? Should we be mindful when we
hmm,
are being loyal? Essentially, what is dharma in a way? That let's be mindful of all the choices that we make. Now,
hmm,
if you look at Karna's loyalty to Duryodhana,
hmm, hmm.
it was in a way blind loyalty.
Right.
Karna was better than the way he behaved often around
Hmm,
Duryodhana, right?
hmm.
And there weren't even attempts by Karna to try and improve Duryodhana, right? We explore Duryodhana's character as well. There is, of
Yeah.
course, a reason for why he behaved the way he did. But how did Karna, as a friend, help his
Yeah.
friend? Is a friend's job just to be blindly loyal,
Right.
or is it to question a friend when that
Hmm,
friend deserves questioning, right?
hmm,
Kumbhakarna, on the other hand, did question Ravan often, you know,
Hmm. Hmm.
did try, and not that he succeeded, but he at least tried, right,
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
change Ravan's approach at times. So both Kumbhakarna and Karna, in that sense, faced the challenges of a noble man who wants to be loyal,
Hmm.
that they ended up being in love with someone who maybe did not deserve that loyalty, right?
Yeah.
And that is a challenge that they faced with their life. Now, Karna just goes into blind loyalty. Kumbhakarna at least grapples with it. He's not
Hmm.
blind to it. He's conscious, but still his life has, you know, he's in this life. His karma was that he's supposed to be loyal to Ravan, so he was. He tried his best to improve his brother. Okay,
Hmm.
uh, but you know, and you'll see in the fourth book there is a change, obviously. Now,
Yeah.
but when you come to Parvateshwar and Lord
Yeah.
Shiva, Parvateshwar had it easy. He
Yeah.
was lucky that he was loyal to a man who deserved that loyalty,
Right.
right? Now, all of us would love that. You know, that if we are in love with someone who deserves that love, if we are
Yeah.
with someone who deserves that loyalty, who's a noble person, that's a wonderful place for us to be as individuals. But what if we are in love with someone who doesn't deserve that love?
Right.
And then what does Dharma say? How should we behave? That's what we
Yeah.
try and grapple through the choices that uh, Kumbhakarna and Karna make. And once
Yeah.
again, it has nothing to do with anything happening in the political space right now, but it is contemporary in a sense. All of us grapple with this. All of us.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, from the mother who may love her son, who may be a wayward son too much and doesn't know what to do. Does she, does she follow her dharma? Does she, are there limitations to that? I mean, there's no end to that.
Yeah.
Bhavna, I'd just like to bring in, you also bring in the contrast between Kali and Karna, which I found so beautiful, that both were abandoned in a sense, but one chose to remain a victim and the other chose not to be a victim. Again, in the way you contrast these personalities and bring them to life, it really does make them seem very much part of our everyday life, which they are, but we seem to have forgotten that. So talk a little about that contrast.
you know, all of us can create a narrative within us of having faced unfairness in life,
Yes.
some way or the other. We've all
Right.
faced unfairness. Life has also been fair to all of us, more than fair, and given us more than we have deserved. Life gives us a glass that is half empty. It also gives all of us a glass that is half full.
Hmm.
How do we respond to how
Hmm.
life has treated us? Now that is, very interestingly contrasted by comparing Karn and Kali and Ganesh.
Yes.
Um, because Karn is resentful. He blames. He feels sorry for himself. He sinks into self-pity. Kali, her challenge is anger, really.
Hmm.
And with anger, I will, bring in Swamiji's book,
Oh my
Science
God, that incident
that,
of Rosh.
if
Oof.
I can, Swamiji, if you allow me to, to state that example,
Oh yes,
because made rongte khade ho gaye.
absolutely.
This is the incident of a father who is,
Yeah.
changing his tire, the punctured tire. He's changing it, at one end, and he gets up and he goes to the other side and sees his 5-year-old son scratching graffiti on his precious car. The father loses it because anger has a way of completely, it transforms you into a monster. It taps into that monster in all of us. And the father has this spanner in his hand and he starts, smashing the hand of the fingers of his 5-year-old child. And by the time he comes back to his senses, he sees that his child is injured. He rushes his child, to the hospital. The doctors in the hospital, Swamiji, it made me cry, that example. I couldn't get over it. In the hospital, the doctors say that two of the little child's fingers have to be cut off. The father is, he's mindless with grief now, and the child's hands are fixed, and they come back home, and as The father is carrying the child indoors. His eyes fall on the graffiti that that 5-year-old child had scribbled in the car, and it was "I love you, Dad." Oh
Yeah.
my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! Such is anger. Such is anger. Kali, coming back to her, she lives with abiding regret, because in anger, the last exchange that she has with her twin sister is one of resentment, harsh words. She turns her back on her sister. Soon thereafter, Sati meets her horrific death. Kali will never, never, never be able to overcome this.
Mm.
Anger is such a monster. uh, there is the third example of Ganesh, who's also been dealt with unfairly by life. But he flips it. He flips his experience, and he is relentlessly kind. He needs to give, give, give. His attitude to life is, I will never tire of giving what I never received, which was love and belonging. How beautiful is that? It's in our hands.
Yeah.
And can I
I,
can I just add something to what Didi
yes,
said?
please.
That
Yeah.
all three of them suffered, but often, life is not about what happens to us. It's how
Yeah.
we react to what happens to us.
Right.
And what Lord Ganesh did with the way he reacted is didn't allow his suffering to scar his soul, and
Mm.
therefore he lived a better life than he could have lived if he'd surrendered to his pain and anger. So, in a sense, all of us can complain. That life treats all of us badly. How do we react to it is what defines how we live.
Absolutely. Before I go on to Swamiji, Amish and Bhavna, I know it's a little sensitive, but since you have mentioned it in the book, may I just raise it here? You've come off a couple of years of deep suffering, personal suffering. You've lost two beloved people in your family. How has it shaped your work, and how has it shaped your attitude to your philosophy? How has it shaped your philosophy? Amish?
Ah, grief is some ways, if you accept it, then it can be an
Hmm.
opportunity.
Hmm.
I guess maybe one of the things to learn is cry over what has to be cried over.
Hmm.
Uh, but we suffer only if we don't accept it
Yeah.
and not. I mean, one can use that and then grow, right?
Hmm.
That's the opportunity
Hmm.
for all of us. And one of the things that certainly helped all the dharmic religions, essentially
Hmm.
Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, the philosophies are similar. The difference is in the lens, perhaps. There are, of course, uh, variations, but these are all, wisdom-based things rather than faith-based
Hmm.
approaches to life. And I think one of the things that helped is a philosophy that's there in Buddhism and some parts of Hinduism and Jainism, that grief is a reality of life.
Hmm.
And perhaps the thing uh, that causes us suffering is if we start thinking कि मेरे साथ क्यों हो रहा है.
Exactly.
When you realize सबके साथ हो रहा है,
Hmm.
and there are of course periods of grief. There were periods of great joy as well, right? And then when we are old and evaluating our life, we will see periods of joy, we'll see periods of grief, and
Hmm.
these periods of grief are there you know uh, to perhaps to teach us something,
Hmm.
and maybe if we learn something, we can move on. And
Hmm.
one of the key things I realize is the strength that family and traditions give you
Yeah.
at times like this. Uh, something that so many people are suffering in the COVID pandemic as
Yeah,
well.
that's right.
The fact that our family is so strong and united, all of us siblings, our in-laws, Didi, Bhavna Di, Anish Da, Mita Bhabi, Ashish, my twin brother Donny. I continue to remain have good relations with my ex-wife Preeti.
Right.
The fact that we are there for each other helps us through it. That's,
Right.
I guess, that's the way to see it.
And some of it is really reflected in the storytelling that you have. You have this marvelous old couple who's such a joy to be with. I really feel like going and visiting them. They seem so real. Bhavna, may I ask you how you coped and how you've come up with this remarkable book after this what must have been a real trauma? I can't even imagine. Do you want to take a moment or do you want to skip that question? You are most welcome. We can go on to Swamiji and then at some point you may want to come back. Yeah?
Kaveri, I was married to a magnificent man.
Yeah.
I'm still married to him. He's just invisible now.
That's a
I
lovely way to put
I
it.
endeavor to follow his example. That's what gives meaning to my life.
That's wonderful. I'm sorry to make you both so emotional, but I think it's very important to understand the idea of suffering. And I think, Mukundananda ji, could you, throw some more light on this? You've talked about, and Bhavna also talked about the whole. She talked about anger, but you also talk about anger, greed, desire, and how we can train our mind to become friends with these, which I find quite fascinating again. And how do we, not just that, but how do we live a life where we can actually, incorporate suffering and yet be happy? Because we know we all have to suffer.
Yes, thank you, Kaveri. Very happy to be on this discussion with Amish and Bhavna. Uh, Kaveri, your question is relevant to practically everyone
Hmm,
because, like Amish said, suffering is a fact of life,
hmm,
and how we handle it
hmm,
makes the entire difference. If our perspective is that the goal of life is to enjoy as much as possible,
hmm,
when that enjoyment is snatched away from us, we feel extreme pain and are unable to cope with it.
hmm,
However, the wisdom of our scriptures gives us a divine perspective to life where we realize that the purpose of life is to grow to an ultimate higher level, to the supreme perfection. And suffering is a part of that journey. So we start looking for lessons in that suffering.
hmm,
Like, for example, you said that Bhavna came through a crisis and she's just written a book. Well, uh, that is how the Bhagavad Gita begins. The first
hmm,
chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is Arjun Vishad Yog.
hmm,
Arjun is in deep gloom. He is faced with such a difficult situation for which he has no wisdom to handle.
hmm,
And he says that his knees are trembling, his mouth is drying up. But that vishad, that suffering, leads to yoga, to
hmm,
union with a higher truth.
hmm,
So when we make our values, our priorities such that I wish to lead a meaningful and purposeful life, and meaning and purpose comes by trying to become the best that I am
right.
and doing the best that I can do. Now, situations are not in our control, usually not. But when something happens, if we can control it, we do. And if we cannot, we learn from it. And then we discover that these adversities, they teach us more then comforts and luxuries and
Hmm.
happiness.
Hmm.
So they are also the tools used by creation,
Hmm.
uh, the evolutionary journey of the soul, in which everyone is participating.
Right. And, sorry. Sorry, I thought I heard an echo. But how does one overcome this? I mean, what are the tools? We know that, suffering exists, there's grief, and that grief will not go away. So, how do we learn to live with it?
Okay, so the first tool that we need to take recourse to is good knowledge,
Hmm.
because good knowledge helps us change our perspective.
Hmm.
We were looking at that situation in a particular manner, and we get this light of divine knowledge that completely changes our perspective. Like, for example, the flooding happened in Uttaranchal,
Hmm.
and villages were washed out about 10
Hmm.
years ago. So, various crews of TV channels were there covering the suffering that had taken place. And all of a sudden, this cameraman turned to one old lady and said, "What is your misery story?"
Hmm.
And she said, "I am thanking God."
Hmm.
So he said, "You have not had any damage in your home."
Hmm.
She said, "My home has been washed away."
Hmm.
He said, "What is there to thank God in it then?"
Hmm.
She said, "My husband is alive and my children are alive. The house can be made again, but
Hmm.
that loss could not have been replaced."
Right.
There was a situation where everybody was besieged by suffering.
Hmm.
And this lady, she was thanking God, feeling gratitude.
Hmm.
How did it happen? It was just a matter of perspective.
Hmm.
Rather than focusing on what she did not have, she was focusing on what we have. So, like Amish was saying, that the world is as it is. How we respond to it is the big thing. In fact, the Ish Upanishad states, Isha Vasyamidam Sarvam Yat Kincha Jagatyan Jagat. The whole world is perfect. And why is it perfect? Because it is emanated from a perfect source.
Hmm.
Like, for example, the spider, it when it weaves a web, it does not get external material for the web. It
Hmm.
extracts it from within itself. So, in one way, the spider itself becomes the web, and when the web is not required, it withdraws it back into itself.
Hmm.
In the same way, the Vedas are telling us that this material energy is emanated from the Supreme. So
Hmm.
the Supreme has become the world, and the world is not different from Him.
Hmm.
Now, in this very world, the great saints came and they were seeing God in every aspect of creation. They were ever in bliss. So, if we are suffering, what is the problem? The world is just the same.
Right.
So the Maitreya Upanishad states, Chittameva hi sansars, there is another world, and that is within you, your own mind. If you can learn to control your mind, it will become your best friend.
Right.
And if you forsake this responsibility to control your emotions, the same mind will become your worst enemy. So that
Right.
is why it is so important to start mastering our mind.
Yeah. And in fact, you talk about the six aspects of surrender, which we'll come to a little later, which I find very interesting because one of them is gratitude as well. You have to practice gratitude, otherwise, you will not understand the meaning of life. Amish, may I come back to you and talk about also the idea of sacrifice? Again, I found that quite fascinating. You talk about Gandhari, you talk about Bhishma, and you talk about this sense of righteous sacrifice, and really again you question that, and again you turn some of our received wisdom on its head so beautifully. So talk a little about that.
Uh, you know, in the field of dharma,
Yeah.
uh, as important as what you do is why you do it.
Why you do it?
In fact, in many cases, why you do it can be even more important than what you do, right?
Hmm.
So here again, let us, to make the example clearer, let's take off three examples to
Hmm.
make this point clearer. One is, of course, Gandhari Ma's sacrifice from the traditional Mahabharata. The other is Bhishma Pitama's sacrifice, and the third is the sacrifice of, which is there in the Ramchand series in the Ravan book, the sacrifice of the mother deer to save
Right.
her children. I'll
Right.
explain that story in a bit. So
Yeah, that's
now,
lovely.
yeah,
Please tell
now,
that story as well.
yeah. So if you see, if you see the story of, that's there in the Ravan book, there is a male lion who's obviously been kicked out of his pride,
Hmm.
and his children are with him. Normally when a lion is kicked out of his pride, whichever lion has beaten him kills that old lion's children. It's the law of
Right.
the jungle, right?
Yeah.
So this male lion has escaped with his cubs who are starving, and
Hmm.
this male lion is old. He's desperate for food. He needs to feed his children. Across the field, he sees a mother deer, okay, and her three children, right? And if he kills one of those dear children, he will feed his children, right?
Hmm.
This is dharma as a father. He starts
Right.
chasing. The mother deer, sees the lion and warns her children. They start running away. One of the children is a runt. He's falling back, and it looks like the lion is about to kill that runt child. The mother deer slows down and comes in between
Yeah.
the male lion and her child. In effect, willing to sacrifice her life.
Sacrifice.
Now, the
Yes.
male lion, and what I show in the book is that the male lion comes up to the mother deer and then is confused. Okay, that because it's a big deer, it'll feed him also, right?
Yeah.
And what does Dharma say? What should the father lion do?
Right.
Should he kill the deer so that he can feed his starving children? Because that's his dharma as a father. Or should he be a good soul and give life to a
Hmm.
magnificent mother who was willing to sacrifice her life for her children? Now, I don't say what happens after that because
Yeah.
both
I know.
are magnificent in a way, and that doesn't matter. The point is why they did what they did.
Yeah.
Now, the mother deer was willing to sacrifice her life, but for a noble reason.
Hmm.
Therefore, that was dharma.
Dharma.
Bhishma Pitama was willing to sacrifice his chance at becoming a king. But was it a noble reason?
Hmm.
His father, Bhishma Pitama's father, had already lived his life, had already experienced all the rasas of life, had fallen in love in his old age once again, right? And his step to be stepmother's father asked for what was an unreasonable request. Bhishma Pitama should have no dharma should have dictated he would know he would be a good king.
Hmm.
Why should he have sacrificed his people's interests
Hmm.
for his father's, you know, uh, need to experience the rasas once again? Right?
Yes.
Was that so? He may have done a sacrifice. Was it was it genuinely for the good of everyone concerned, or was
Yeah.
it that he wanted to be called great? Right? And then the counterfactual that emerges is if he had not sacrificed and
Hmm.
he had become king, would the Mahabharat war have even taken place?
Exactly.
So now that's a counterfactual. That's and the same way we can see Ma Gandhari as well. So
Yeah.
the point one is trying to make is often we make sacrifices which are for our ego and not even in the interest of the person we are sacrificing for,
Right.
right? Uh, so we should always step back and think, why do we want to make a sacrifice? Is it for our ego? And that's also selfishness. Are
Hmm.
you actually going to help someone else?
Hmm.
If there's no selfishness in it, then that nobility makes your sacrifice great. So the act of sacrifice itself is not great. Why you do it makes it great or negative. That's the point we try and get across. So again,
Yeah.
live mindfully. Live mindfully.
Right. Right. No, I found that really fascinating. Bhavna, I also want to ask you about something that you talk about again and again, which is the difference between wanting and having. That having is not a problem, wanting can be a never ending process, and you talk about it in the book as well. And in a way, Swamiji also talks about greed and desire, and we'll come to that. So explain the difference and why it's important that we know the difference between having and wanting, which is so important, especially in these COVID times where we've realized we can do it so much less, isn't it?
So, what our Shastras teach us, the Upanishads state it again and again, is that pleasure is really not a problem.
Hmm.
Swamiji talks about Shreyas and Prayas as I found that very interesting. Delayed gratification and instant gratification. I think that was a beautiful take on Shreyas and Prayas.
Right.
Uh, Shreyas being goodness and Prayas being pleasure.
Hmm.
Wanting can drive you crazy. Having is nice. There's no problem with having. In fact, the mother-in-law tells Nachiket beautifully. She teases him about his, washroom being full of deodorants. And
Deodorant, yes, yes, I know.
Nachiket, the son-in-law, says, "Well, I buy it with my own money. I'm not stealing other people's
Yeah.
deodorant." And his mother-in-law says to him that having is not a problem. Uh, Wake up tomorrow morning and buy another deodorant if you so please, but you should be equally all right with never again buying a deodorant for the rest of your life.
Hmm.
Equipoise, which is basically the difference between having and wanting. Swamiji, again, coming back to his book, the parallel lies in, he's talking about self-talk. That
Yeah.
fascinated me.
Yeah, yeah.
The power of using self-talk to create good, noble habits
Mm.
in your basal ganglia, in your brain.
Hmm.
Forming good habits through constant self-talk. And the example he gave was so good that even as it struck, a chord with me, Swamiji, because we live in times where respectful conversation is often a challenge these days. Uh, in the era of social justice warriors and being so closely identified with your own stances, your opinions, respectful conversation seems almost impossible. And what Swamiji talks about is that even as I am talking to a person, I may
Hmm.
be talking well, but the self-talk that is simultaneously going on within me is, she's talking rubbish. Oh, she's so boring. I wish she would, shut up. There's a complete mismatch between the words that are coming out of my mouth and the self-talk that is happening within me. Now, what Swamiji says is that this self-talk, it gets the neural pathways that are creating this self-talk within my brain are going to create shortcuts. This repeated talk will create the shortcuts will be created to the neural pathways in my basal ganglia. And this will become actually willy-nilly my mode of interaction with the world, because it's not about X or Y or Z. By this constant self-talk, what I have made impossible is for me to be able to engage in conversations respectfully.
Hmm.
Uh, so a positive self-talk is so important.
Absolutely. Swamiji, talk about desire and greed.
Desire and greed.
We've already talked about anger.
I think Bhavna has just touched on it.
Yeah.
Like she mentioned, desire per se is not bad. Desire is an energy. And if it is dovetailed in the wrong direction, it
Hmm.
becomes harmful. It becomes unlimited craving.
Hmm.
And if it is diverted in the proper direction, it can become a great asset. So, to answer your question, well, the Vedas tell us that desire, the nature of desire is such, it can never be fulfilled.
Hmm.
If you think, okay, let me have 100 crores and my desires will all be over, then we are fooling ourselves. Because
Absolutely.
when we reach 100 crores, the desires will increase 100-fold. In fact, it goes on to the extent of saying, Girir Mahan, Girir Abhir
Right.
Mahan
Right.
Abhir Namo
Right.
Bhat.
Right.
Sorry.
Should I continue?
Yeah.
Hello?
Please carry on.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. So it says that if one person were to get the whole world,
Right.
the desire would still go beyond. And that
Right.
is why desire is bigger than God Himself.
Right.
So, what is greed? It is when desire reaches the level of craving.
Hmm.
However, the Bhagavad Gita, for example, it says that why does desire develop at all?
Hmm.
The reason for desire is attachment.
Hmm.
Like a mother is attached to her child.
Hmm.
So she desires her child to hug the child, to be with the child. The child may be ugly, but the mother doesn't want just any child. She
Hmm.
doesn't want beauty. She wants her own child to whom her mind has got attached.
Hmm.
So, if we start analyzing the cause of greed is desire and the cause of desire is attachment, now what we need to do is not reach a state free of all attachments, but in the path of bhakti or devotion, we divert the attachment to an all pure object.
Hmm.
That all pure object is the Supreme.
Hmm.
So when the mind is attached to the all pure, it becomes purified
Right.
itself.
Right.
So ultimately, auspiciousness in life, well being in life, and happiness in life is all a consequence of the state of our mind. So
Hmm.
that mind gets purified through bhakti. So now Bhavna has been talking about my book. If you give me a little permission, I'll talk a little about their books.
Please. Please.
You see,
Let us
our
have a mutual appreciation club.
well, our the Vedic scriptures have got such wonderful knowledge.
Hmm.
But to present that knowledge required a setting of that caliber.
Hmm.
And our Puranas, our Mahabharata, Ramayana are presenting us with such Leela's pastimes that facilitate the imparting of that kind of knowledge. Now, as India rises and as India advances, it is natural that people are looking for ways to make their lives a success. And in this pursuit, if they blindly run after what is being offered by Western philosophers,
Hmm.
like Sigmund Freud and Karl Marx and etc., they miss out the treasures that are there in our culture and our heritage. So I would like to congratulate Amish for the wonderful work he has done in attracting the attention of our youth and enhancing their pride in our culture. So, to his millions of readers, I would like to say that he's inspiring you. Awake, arise, and stop not till the goal is reached. And now that he's been joined
I mean,
by his
yeah.
elder sister, so 1 + 1 makes 11. There
Yeah.
are two. And the book is tickling people's intellect with a
Yeah.
whole lot of questions.
Right.
And that is also in the direction of knowledge.
Right.
Because when we start questioning, it is natural we have started moving from the darkness to the light.
Absolutely.
So,
Beautifully.
congratulations for all your wonderful work. And if I can do anything to inspire your readers, it'll be my privilege.
I think you're already doing that. Again, something that's so similar between your two books that I noticed, Swamiji and Amish and Bhavna. You talk about the power of conditioning and how discipline is so important in the power in conditioning one's mind, in mastering one's mind. Amish and Bhavna talk about diligence, not negligence, which again I found quite a fascinating concept. Amish, would you like to talk about that?
In fact, I think actually Didi should speak on this because
I
she
like
gets
that
this
so
thought
much.
very well.
Call her Didi.
So she is my Didi. I have to call her Didi.
That's very sweet. So Bhavna Didi, please tell us about this whole concept of diligence and not negligence. I think this, which of course I think the modern world likes to call mindfulness, which I think they've borrowed from us, of course.
Yeah.
But talk a little about that.
Diligence is karmatha, conscious living, effortful living.
Right.
Um, it is so easy to be effortless.
Hmm.
To be effortful takes determination. It takes discipline. Discipline needs. I'll once again, refer to Swamiji's book.
Hmm.
Discipline needs to be exercised,
Yeah.
like muscles. There is no understanding. There's no theoretical understanding of discipline that is possible. That is what diligence is. In fact, this COVID period has been particularly helpful to me in this regard because I have been able to really put diligence into action. Which is a conscious decision I made as the lockdown had begun. Because,
Hmm.
if I'm going to be constrained indoors, I said to myself, I've got to create my own rhythm, my own discipline. And because there are no outside schedules and responsibilities that are going to aid and abet my half-hearted efforts at living diligently and living with discipline, it's completely on me. I've been able to do it actually 100% because I decided as COVID began that I'm going to wake up at 6 in the morning, 10
Hmm.
out of 10 times. I'm going to then do my workout 5 times, 5 days in a week. I'm going to have my breakfast. I'm going to start working. Television time, Netflix time is going to be evening.
Hmm.
I'm going to go to bed at this time. Generate work if I do not have work. Now,
Hmm.
this actually, I borrowed an infinitesimal, learning from my mother-in-law. If
Hmm.
I may, state this, I have lost her now. But my mother-in-law and I understood. It took COVID for me to understand this aspect of my mother-in-law.
Hmm.
Every Sunday, my mother-in-law at 10 in the morning, what was scheduled is she would open her cupboard
Yes, sorry.
and remove, and she would do it herself. She would remove everything from her cupboard, put it on her bed all on her own. Her
Hmm.
muslin wrapped saris and her blouses and her petticoats and her boxes and her stuff. She would bring them all out, put them on the on the bed. She would wipe clean the shelves in the cupboard. She would open the mud every Sunday, 10
Hmm.
o'clock. She would
Hmm.
open the muslin sheets and resequence the saris and then,
Wow.
wrap the muslin sheets again and put it back. I could never really understand this. And I used to say, Mummy, I will do it. Why don't you ask Lakshmi to do it? But, why don't you just relax? Now, her life was nothing but, an unending business of relaxation. And she generated work to give her rhythm, to give her the opportunity to practice diligence. How beautiful is that?
Hmm.
uh, I understood the beauty of that when I began to generate work during COVID times because I wanted to live in a disciplined and diligent fashion.
So I hope we'll see much more writing from you, Bhavna.
Not wrapping
Well
in
said.
muslin wrapped saris.
In fact, I wanted to ask Amish and you, how was it to write with a collaborator this time, Amish? Was it a different rhythm? Did it take a different kind of discipline from you?
But no, it was very easy actually because we started work on this project many years ago, and then it went into cold storage, because of personal issues, and then we restarted it again in the COVID time. But in terms of the relationship, I mean, it's easy because I've said often that even the fiction books that I've written, and it might have my name on it, but it truly is a kind of like a family project.
Family
So
project, yeah.
I discuss all the philosophies are discussed with Bhavna Di. I discuss story aspects with my Anish Dada and Meeta Bhabi. I discuss business stuff with my twin brother Ashish. And like I said, I'm still in touch with my ex-wife Preeti. I discuss things with her. So it truly is like a collaborative project, all my books. So this was just actually one more where we just happen to work much more closely together.
Right.
Fortunately, our relationship is also good because I am a control freak, I admit. But Didi is 8 years elder, and I am used to listening to her. So, so therefore, in this case, I was willing to listen. And Didi has also been extremely sweet in the way we've worked together. So, in fact, actually, we are working on another book project already, and Lord Shiva's blessings. We'll hopefully have one non-fiction book coming out every year and a half on subjects like this, because actually the initial thing had begun on the beauty of Murti Puja,
Right.
on why that is so important, and such an and the innate liberalism that comes in those who worship idols. And
Right.
this was the beginning, and that will actually come in another book, and that's how many of these philosophy discussions start.
Talk a little about this idea. I find it quite fascinating without giving away the subject of your next book. But how does this happen?
uh, I think we'll discuss the philosophies on that in the book, but let me put this point to you that over the last 1500 2000 years, there are various idol worshipping, idol rejecting cultures
Hmm.
which went around massacring millions of people,
Right.
destroying entire civilizations, burning universities to the ground, destroying temples, simply because those cultures worshipped idols.
Hmm.
Uh, you find almost no case study of the reverse happening,
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
idol worshipping cultures going around massacring people because they were not worshipping idols.
Hmm.
And the key point to ponder is, why is that? And this is not just true of India, this is true across the world.
It's quite
Most of the ancient
fascinating.
world was actually idol worshipping pagan, right?
Right.
Most of the ancient world. Uh, India just happens to be one of the few cultures that has survived, right?
Hmm.
Uh, and there is a deeper philosophical lesson that comes in with Murti Puja, which comes in almost instinctively without people realizing it. There is no perfection. Every
Hmm.
way of life has its strengths and weaknesses. But one of the innate strengths of Murti Puja cultures is there's like a deep sense of liberalism that comes in almost automatically. And we'll explain why in this book.
I think I can't wait to read that. It's quite a fascinating thought, and it's totally original. I've never heard this or read this anywhere. Swami Mukundanand, can you talk a little about the six aspects of surrender, which really are like it's like a checklist for how to live. So I think our readers will really benefit from that.
Definitely. Uh, there are various ways how why surrender becomes necessary.
Hmm.
Firstly, when we realize that we have limitations in our abilities and
Hmm.
we feel the need to connect with something that is bigger, that is higher, and receive help in the form of grace.
Hmm.
So that desire inspires us to surrender.
Hmm.
Now, the Vedas tell us that the simple way to cross over this ocean of life and death, which is made of the material narrative Maya, is you surrender to the Lord.
Hmm.
So, your question is, what does surrender entail?
Hmm.
In many places, it has been described as having six constituting points.
Hmm.
And these are really so beautiful, like you said, it's a philosophy of life. The first is to desire in accordance with the desire of the Lord.
Of the Lord, yeah.
So, plain and simple, He wants us to be pure, He wants us to be happy, He wants us to be effective. When you align your desires in accordance with His desires, that is the ground for surrender. And the second is not to desire against His desire.
Hmm.
So, for example, that immediately rules out all unethical thoughts,
Right.
unethical desires, because He doesn't want it. But not only that, the results of our efforts are never in our hands.
Hmm.
What is in our hands is the effort itself. So, having put in our best efforts, even if the results are not according to our liking, we, we refuse to be frustrated. Well,
Hmm.
maybe it's the will of God, and that immediately makes us serene. So, these two bring our mind to a state of great
Great.
peace.
Yeah.
Now, third is to have faith that
Hmm.
I am being protected. So, in the short run, one may say, where are we being protected? We are being subject to disease and subject to poverty, etc.
Absolutely.
But that if the Lord is our Father, He is protecting us
Hmm.
in a spiritual way, which means His protection is to ensure our spiritual growth. And the more we surrender, the more that protection pours in. So, the sign of surrender is that we become free from fear. If somebody has fear, that means there's lack of surrender.
Hmm.
Now, just to take a leaf out of Amish's style, I'd like to relate a story from our Mahabharata.
Hmm.
When Bhishma, he resolved that tomorrow by sunset I will kill Arjun,
Hmm.
or Lord Krishna will have to lift weapons in his protection.
Hmm.
So when the war ended that evening, this news spread, and everybody was worried what will happen tomorrow, our best warrior Arjun. And Lord Krishna was also worried what is this going to come to?
Hmm.
Thinking about it, it became 2 o'clock at night. Then he thought, if I am so worried, what will be the situation of Arjun?
Hmm.
Let me go and console him. So he walked out of his tent. He came to where Arjun was sleeping, but he could only hear sounds of snoring. He said, wow, so peaceful. He woke him up and said, Parth, what's the matter? Arjun woke up, my lord, at this time of the night. Arjun, have you not heard the news? So Arjun said, of course I have heard the news. Are you not worried? Arjun said, Maharaj, for my protection, you are so worried that you are unable to sleep till 2 o'clock at night. Then
So
why
I
should I
should.
worry myself? That faith that
Yeah.
He is the Father and He's taking care of us. That's the
Right.
third point. I'll go faster now. The fourth point, to feel gratitude
Yeah.
for all that we have received.
Hmm.
One is ingratitude. Tell the son that be thankful to your father. He cut his stomach to feed you. And the son says he was doing his duty. What's the big deal?
Hmm.
So, on the other hand, is gratitude. So, just
Hmm.
for the air we breathe, the earth we walk upon, everything we received, to realize it as graces.
Hmm.
That's the fourth point of surrender. And the fifth is to give up the sense of ownership
Hmm.
and feel that everything I have is His. It
Hmm.
is not. I came empty handed and I'll go back also empty handed. So to give up that sense of ownership. And the sixth and final one is to surrender and also give up the pride of having surrendered.
Yeah. Yeah.
To think that if I was able to do anything good, it was by His grace. Otherwise, what abilities do I have? These are the 6 points.
Yeah, I think they're so marvelous. I thought that it would be best to hear it from your own, in your own voice. But Amish, there are a couple of questions which I think would be good if you could take them.
Sure.
What's dharma? Karma creates dharma, or dharma creates karma?
Uh, uh, look, at the root of the word dharma is a Sanskrit dhatu called dhru. That
Right,
which binds, that which balances, that which holds together. That is dharma.
right.
So, one of the things that we use in one of the books to explain it. Look, we can our ancestors discuss dharma over many lifetimes. So it's
Yes.
difficult to discuss all aspects of it in a long program. But I'll give one thought, one way to approach it. Is that one obvious thing? Dharma is not religion, obviously. Okay.
Right.
Dharma is that which balances, that which is in the center, that which binds the universe, and not just human beings, binds the universe, or everything together. And karma is our action with
Hmm.
regard to dharma. Now,
Hmm.
if our karma is in line with dharma, we'll
Hmm.
move towards balance. We will get a sense of peace, a sense of purpose. If our karma is is adharmic, we will move
Hmm.
away from dharma, and then we will get, you know,
Hmm.
the consequences of it, right?
Right.
So the karma is in our hands,
Yeah.
right? What we do, but that should always be in relation to dharma. There are
Hmm.
various levels of dharma, of course. There's Sanatan Dharma, Yug Dharma, Kul Dharma, Swadharma. But we must be conscious of what dharma is, and then our karma is, in a sense, our actions in relation to dharma. Perhaps that's the best way to see it.
Yeah.
At least that's the way I try to see it.
No, I think that's really well done. Amish, again, another question. Why don't you write a textbook for kids? Kids will really enjoy the subject.
Okay. I mean, my schedule is already quite packed, but good idea.
No, but actually, this can easily be read by anyone of
Yes,
any age.
it is structured. It is structured that way.
Yeah,
It's an easy conversation. Anyone can read it. And look, I think, and one of the things, and you see from the way Swamiji explains,
yeah,
also one of the things our ancestors said, that you don't have to make things complex to explain
hmm,
a complex concept.
hmm,
Uh, yeah, in fact, it's always much better to try and present it in as easy to read a manner as possible, or easy to understand a manner as possible. And that's the perspective of conversations and stories. It just makes it easier to absorb as
absolutely.
compared to a pure non-fiction, hypothesis,
Heavy thinking, yeah,
explanation,
that,
which then you get lost, because it's, yeah, a, you can't show all sides. Two, it becomes unnecessarily complex.
but the old couple in this book has really become my favorite. I hope to see a lot more of them.
Oh yeah, we
Uh,
will.
yeah. Swamiji, there's a question for you. What inspired you to write The Science of Mind Management? The
Yes.
fact that you went to IIM like Amish,
In fact, we went to the very same IIM.
Oh, I didn't know that. Wow.
and you went to an IIT as well, Swamiji. So, I mean, what all did you do by the age of 23?
Kaveri, when I go to USA and explain these spiritual concepts, most of the Indians there are engineers and MBAs.
Right.
And they say, Swamiji, for the first time, these principles are making sense. So I say that God wanted an engineer, Swamiji, to explain to the engineers, because I know how you people think. So to answer your question,
Yeah.
my training in spirituality was classical in the scriptures, the Vedic scriptures. And then when I went, my spiritual master, Jagadguru Sri Kripaluji Maharaj, he wanted me to spread this knowledge in the West.
Hmm.
And when I started discoursing in USA, etc., I discovered that people were not connecting with this knowledge.
Hmm.
Probably the manner of presentation or the frame of reference, they could not see the relevance of it to their lives. And then I decided that people out here are very practical. What
Hmm.
they want is to understand what is in it for me.
Hmm.
So if I go on explaining about the philosophic concepts, in India, it's very exciting. You could
Hmm.
sit in a railway train and discuss whether Bhagwan is Sakar or Nirakar, and the whole cabin will engage in a very animated debate.
Hmm.
But the environment there was different, and our modern youth, etc., in India are also much like that.
Right.
So, very practical nowadays that
Hmm.
it's pure philosophy doesn't interest people. So, then I was looking at some kind of format to present the knowledge that I had received. And this is what I decided upon, that ultimately the mind is so crucial to our life. We
Hmm.
wish to be happy. And happiness is always a consequence of our thoughts. The environment could be most difficult. But if we are finding fulfillment in our strivings, it gives us great happiness. In other words, it's our thoughts that make us happy and our thoughts that make us sad. And secondly, we wish to improve ourselves. That improvement is also tied to our thoughts. We
Hmm.
cannot say, I'm a good man if I have bad thoughts. In Hindi, there's a saying, Jaisa man, vaise hum.
Right.
We are veritably what our mind is. And the third thing is, we wish to do good. We wish to work effectively and do something that makes a difference in the world. Thoughts are the precursors of our actions. So, our three basic urges of our inner being are to be good, to do good, and to feel good. And each of these, the mind is critical. Now, our Vedas have said it all along. Man eva manushyanam karanam bandha mokshayo. The mind is the cause of bondage, and the mind is the cause of liberation. In fact, this Shankaracharya put it so well, a verse that actually reflects the Indian culture. He said, Jagat jitam kena, who shall conquer the world? And the answer he gave was not somebody who has superior weapons.
Hmm.
Manohiyena, one who has conquered his or her own mind. That's
Hmm.
why I came across a statement by Swami Vivekananda, which I found so fascinating. He was the first Swamiji to go to USA.
Oh
And
yeah.
before he went there, he said, I shall lift my mind to such heights that I inspire people everywhere until the world realizes it is one with God.
And
So our saints and scriptures have emphasized the mind. Now, there are the psychology in the West, I've read it, it's totally unimpressive. And what we have in our Vedic heritage is so perfect. If somebody just willing to pay attention, we have the tools up there. So, with the desire to reveal this knowledge, I wrote this book.
right. Thank you so much. I'd like to end now by asking each one of you during this really difficult time, the COVID time, what was the one, or who was the one God, or who was the one figure that inspired you and why? Amish, would you like to go first?
Uh, I know for me, it's a very easy answer. Lord Shiva,
Lord
obviously.
Shiva.
I wear a Om Namah Shivaya kada. I wear a Rudrakshmala. I do a Mahamrutyunjaya jap every morning, and he is. I can never thank him enough for the blessings that I have. And it
Right.
is in a way a very bizarre situation. I'm by myself out here, right? And I thought I'll be coming back, regularly, but
Yeah.
I'm been
But
stuck here. But as Swamiji was saying, that one can always either get into the negatives of what we are stuck in, or see the positives. So look, there are people who are suffering a lot worse. I don't have a problem of food or housing, or I'm in a comfortable place. We have this wonderful technology. I can see my son. I might be so far away, but I can see my son
hmm,
regularly. I
hmm,
can talk to him on video calls. So there are positives if you're willing to see it. And of course, this is a very difficult time. There is an opportunity for us to, for all of us, the world to, in a way, reevaluate life. Uh, and maybe we will. All these great times of sorrow are a chance to reevaluate life.
But do you think we'll come out a better race? Do you think we will go from the darkness to the light, or will we go back to our old ways again?
Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya. I hope so. Look, one of the things that's forgotten is that the roaring 1920s, which
Yeah,
was there in the US, a time of hedonism, drugs,
right.
debauchery, was actually a reaction to the death and
Spanish.
destruction of the First World War and the
Oh, and
Spanish
the
flu.
Spanish one.
And the
Yeah,
Spanish flu, which led to 50 million deaths in a far
yeah,
smaller population, and the First World War, which led to some 20, 30 million deaths. So, and the attitude became anyway, marna hai, might as well just enjoy life. Now,
yeah.
that is one, for all you know, maybe the world will emerge from this going on that route. All right.
Right.
One hopes it doesn't, because the other route could be that this is a time to reevaluate life. Can we rediscover spirituality? Can we rediscover the beauty of community? Can
Yeah.
we rediscover the beauty of traditions? Uh, and I hope humanity goes on the second route. And I think India can be a very, very important part
Absolutely.
of driving that conversation. I'm living in London. I can tell you there are many Westerners who are actually taking a step back, from their materialism. They are wondering that, do we need to reevaluate life? And India can provide the answers.
Hmm.
Uh, so I think it's important that more and more books of our Indian traditions come out, which speaks of this and will hopefully um, maybe encourage humanity to go on that second route of spirituality, community,
Right.
traditions. Then this crisis would have at least led to some positive outcome.
Right. Swamiji, what do you think? Are we moving towards the light? And who was your guiding light during this time?
Yes, Kaveri, the mother sometimes showers her affection by embracing the child and sometimes says, "You will not get anything to eat, go and stand by the wall." But both of those are expressions of the mother's love.
Right.
So, in the same way, this is also an expression of divine grace.
Yeah.
We were so focused on doing, 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 and we neglected being. We
Hmm.
neglected our inner development. We were overvaluing the external wealth
Hmm.
and missing out on the inner wealth,
Hmm.
the wealth within ourselves, the virtues, the good beliefs, the good ideas, the good thoughts. So when God locked everybody up, it just gave them an opportunity to introspect, to spend time, invest time upon themselves. Now, everything can have two consequences. Some people, they went down in this situation. They went into depression.
Yeah.
But a whole lot of people found that they had actually discovered themselves and they had actually mended their family. In
Hmm.
fact, the earth itself is getting mended.
Yeah, that's
I
true.
firmly believe that this is within the divine plan and it is helpful in a way that is presently inconceivable to us. It is also a divine arrangement. So I
Absolutely.
never changed any of my beliefs just because the Lord is behaving differently.
Bhavna, what about you? Was there anyone deity, anyone god you turned to for succor, for relief?
In all honesty, during COVID times, my inspiration was my husband. I
Okay.
strove to consciously imbibe some of his qualities of diligence, rhythmic living, disciplined living, positivity, generating positivity among people around him. He had this fantastic quality of
It's a great personality. Yeah.
uh, so really, he was my inspiration. I followed his example during COVID times. And also, I would like to mention my spiritual gurus, Yaron and Sivan Barzile.
Oh,
They have guided me and inspired me during COVID times as well as otherwise.
who are they, Bhavna? Can you talk a little about them?
So,
I,
I'm a member of a philosophical school called New Acropolis,
uh-huh.
uh, and it is the director of it's an international chain of philosophy schools, and the director of the North Indian branch is an Israeli gentleman called Yaron Barzilay, and he uh, does this along with his wife Sivan. I am a
Okay.
member, and they're deeply inspirational to me.
Okay, wonderful. So I think we found a lot of learning among all three of you, apart from the books. Thank you so much. I can only thank you on behalf of all our viewers, readers, for all that you've done and all that you will do, I hope. I look forward to reading more tales from uh, Amish and Bhavna, and of course, more about the mind from Swami Mukundananda. Thank you so much, all three of you. I
Thank you so
hope we
much.
emerge. I hope we emerge into the light. Thank you.
I'm sure we will.
Thank you.
Namaskar, Swamiji.
Yes.
Thank you so much,
Success
Kaveri.
always.
Namaste, Amish.
Thanks,
Namaste,
Kaveri.
Bhavna.
Thank